And you do learn, you know, I'm not a musician, but I can tell when someone's in or out of tune, and I can tell when something's good or bad. And one of the big things I learned is that I was lucky. I worked with some really great producers at the Townhouse, and since then, the teacher. It's not always about the technology either. I see so many kind of younger guys getting a bit caught up in the technology, and one thing that I got taught was that it's all about the performance. You know, you could have the most expensive microphone in the world on the best guitar amp with the best guitar, but if the guy doesn't play it well, it's still not going to be great. Whereas, you know, if he's really in the mood for doing it, and the closest mic you've got at hand is an SM57, and you just got to put it up and record it, if he plays his life out and it's just the best solo ever, it doesn't really matter that it was on a 57, you know. We've got all this equipment, we can tweak with it after. Whereas I see some guys and they're like, well, I'm just going to get that, oh, hang on, I'll get another mic. I go, no, just any mic because he's ready to go. You know, so it's very important to find that balance. It doesn't mean you should make bad sounding records, but just to get the balance and consider the moment, because with most artists, they're very creative, and a lot of them don't understand about technology, and they just want to do it. And if they're up for doing it, then just try and get it, you know. So.
And do you have like your own workstation back home, or you only do work like?
No, I do have my own workstation back home. I've got a Pro Tools HD2, and I've got a Logic setup. It varies what I use. Pro Tools is obviously a lot more powerful, but sometimes some of the work I get, someone will have a song, it'll be from a writer, so they'll be working in Logic, and they'll ask me to mix it, and it's all in Logic, and a lot of it, they've maybe recorded the MIDI, but the MIDI's still there, and a lot of it is just sometimes their sounds, so I can just get it to sound better just by replacing some of the MIDI with my own virtual instruments and my own sample library. So it's just a lot easier for me to keep it in Logic, because I'm not big on MIDI in Pro Tools. It's got really good now, but because I've always done my MIDI side in Logic, I just prefer it. But the other thing as well, I think I find as well, I get a lot of writers who have become producers, who've written some songs and they've got all the latest gear and they think they can use it. And some of it they can to a degree, and they'll get me and they go, right, I've got Pro Tools HD, and I bought this Neumann mic. It was £1,500, and it's the one that everyone was recommending. Great. And I've recorded this, and I did the piano myself because I can play a bit, and with cutting and pasting it, it's all still fine. That'll do it. Blah, blah. And I programmed the drums myself. They're not real, but I've programmed it, and I've got some real samples. And I just want you to mix it, and can you make it sound like this? And they'll give you some Steely Dan record or Michael Jackson Thriller or something, you know, some amazing sounding record. And you kind of go, well, I can do my best, but it's not going to sound like that because what you've got. And, you know, I swear some people have given me stuff and I swear the mic is pointing the wrong way. And they think, oh, I've got Pro Tools, I've got the mic, it's going to sound brilliant. But, you know, there's no presence, and I can just tell they've got to sing in the wrong side, and it's just so, you know, it's unfortunately because when I worked in studios, training, you had demo recording, which was pretty much those 4-track reel-to-reels or a ghetto blaster with just an acoustic guitar or a basic synthesizer. The next level was going into a commercial studio, and that equipment wasn't affordable to everybody or accessible. And even if you could, you wouldn't know how to work it. So you had to go somewhere that A, had all that equipment, and generally the people working there knew how to use it. So the quality went from being quite basic to very, very good. Now, writers and people at home can get that same sort of equipment and just throw anything into it. And I think a lot of people don't get their head around the fact that it's how you do it. So it's well worth, you know, learning all your mic techniques. You know, just where you place the microphone can change the sound so much. You know, recording strings, if you're careful where you place them, you hardly need to EQ them. Whereas I see people trying to EQ the life out of them and going, no, it's not quite sounding how I want. I just think if you just went and moved the mic a little bit, it would sound 10 times better, and you wouldn't have to do all that work, and it would just be. So it's, you know, something to be said for just try lots of different styles. I mean, what style is your main, what do you work in?
I'm working mostly on pop stuff.
Pop stuff, so it's programmed and?
Played and programmed.
Yeah.
Both, yeah.
But also by working with real instruments and real people, you get to see how things can sound and how good they can sound. So even when you maybe don't have a real drummer, if you know how good a real drummer can sound, then you have something to aim for. So it gives you something to compare it to. Some people don't have that. A lot of the writers I work with, all they've done is ever program, so they don't know that, yeah, he can play the guitar himself and it'll be all right, but he doesn't know by getting so-and-so in to do it, who's a great guitar player, it's just going to sound 50 times better before you start. So, what else was I going to mention to you? Yeah, the beauty of working at other studios as well is that I found when I was an assistant at the studio, I was always learning because I'd be working with engineers who would come in and I'd be watching them and learning what they do. And the more competent you get, and towards the end of my time there, some of the time they'd have freelance, because it was quite fashionable at one point to go and work at a really good studio for a year and then go freelance. And they thought that because they could say, oh, I worked at Sam or I worked at so-and-so with all these people, they thought they could do it and they'd get lots of work. What they didn't realise is that they didn't really learn very much because they were only there for a year, so therefore they got found out and didn't get too much work after that. So you would sometimes get engineers that would come in and they wouldn't know half the things you knew. So they would do things, and in some ways you learn how not to do things. I saw people making some really big mistakes. So you're always learning something. And that was the one thing that when I went from being an assistant to a freelance engineer, it was a little bit sad because you suddenly, the amount you learn goes down a little bit because sort of the buck stops with you. You're now the sort of person in charge doing everything. And okay, you're learning bits off the producer and the band. So that was why going to other studios and working with assistants that I didn't know, in places I didn't know, you know, you'd say to them, well, I was going to do this, what do you think? And they go, well, Bob Clearmountain was in last week doing this and he got this trick where he does this. And you go, oh, fantastic. I'd never have learnt that because I hadn't worked with him, so brilliant. And you just build up different ways of doing things. And even just reading stuff, and you know, you never stop learning. Anyone who thinks they knows it all is talking rubbish. You know, you're always learning. I did quite a bit of work with a girl pop artist called Gabrielle, and she got approached by a film company to write a song for a film called Bridget Jones's Diary. So she read the book. And she wrote the song specifically, and we went in and recorded it. And there was two sides to the brief. One part of the brief was that they loved the record company loved the demo, and the record company, although it was going in the film, the record company were obviously paying for it, and they were going to release it, so they had to be happy. So they loved the demo, and they said it's really great. We'll just go in and record it. And like a lot of times, people try and change stuff, even though it's not broke. And the demo was good, and the film people got sold on it, and so did the record company people. But when we went in the studio to record it, the producer and a couple of people went, oh, okay, let's change it up a bit, because I suppose as well, he'd probably lived with it a lot longer, so he's bored with it. So he changed quite a bit of stuff. And then when we delivered it, the record company didn't like it. So we'd spent between a week and 10 days recording it all, been in, put an orchestra on it, put brass on it, the lot. And they didn't like it, so we had to go and re-record it. So we went back in and we re-recorded it in 2 days, and it's much better. So it just goes to show, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And what we did do, a little cheat to get around it, the only thing they did want to change was make it very slightly quicker. So when we re-recorded it slightly quicker. But we didn't really want to have to go, because the arrangement was the same, we didn't want to have to go and redo the orchestra, because that was the most expensive part. So I don't know if you're all familiar with Pro Tools. There's a time and pitch plugin called Serato. There's a lot of them now, but at the time it was the best one. So we pitched all the strings to the new tempo with that. It was only about 3 BPM to save us going in and doing that, so it saved them quite a bit of money.